No hands for community comments. We'll move to the next item on our agenda, which would be the interim superintendent comments.
All right.
Welcome, Maureen.
Thank you. First thing I'm going to talk about is I am currently involved in participating in the new superintendent's induction program. MSIP for short is what we tend to call it. This program is in its 12th year of existence, and I started in July, and it includes monthly meetings along with about 38 other new superintendents in the program across Massachusetts. Many of the content meetings are facilitated by coaches in the program, and all the coaches are successful, retired Massachusetts superintendents. And in addition to the content sessions, I've been assigned an individual coach who I've asked to come tonight, and his name is John Brackett, who's present right here. I'm going to have him come on up, and he's going to give you a little bit of background on his role and a little bit about the program, so you're familiar with it as well.
Welcome, John.
Thanks. It's a pleasure to be here, and I want to let you know that I'm really extremely pleased to be working with Maureen and working in the Mendon-Upton school district. As Maureen mentioned, I'm part of the MSIP program, the new superintendent's induction program, and I was a coach. I've been a coach in the program for 4 years. Prior to that, I was a superintendent for 22 years. And I know it. How could you be a superintendent for 22 years? You only look 38, right? But, yeah, okay, so you're not going with that, right? Okay. 10 of those years were in Massachusetts. 12 of those years were actually in Michigan, then Massachusetts. And I think, full disclosure, I was superintendent before this program came to me. And having spent 4 years in the program, I have to say that I wish it was in place when I was a superintendent. It was not. I think I would have avoided making some very rookie mistakes. I think I would have focused more on important issues as opposed to what I consider to be urgent issues. And I think I would have understood relationships in the school district and within the school and community better. And I would have begun focusing on teaching and learning sooner than I did. And I mention those 4 things because those are really pillars of our program and things that we work with and work with new superintendents on. Because our goal is pretty simple. We want to make every superintendent as successful as they possibly can be. And we are really happy to have Maureen in the program. We understand that she's in an interim role right now, but I think you know, and I'm probably not telling you anything, but she has a very strong and positive reputation in not only this area, but in the state as a real leader, especially in the area of teaching and learning. So we're happy to have her in the program and participating and contributing to its success. As she mentioned, one of the things that we do is we meet about monthly, with all of the cohort and coaches together. There is a curriculum in this program. There are work products associated with the program. So it's not just sit around and kind of talk and how do you feel and what are you doing and that kind of stuff. We have content that we deliver on a monthly basis. In addition, she and I will spend at least 6 hours a month in one-to-one. And some of that time, we will just meet one-to-one. Some of that time, we'll visit schools and we'll do walkthroughs in terms of walking through classrooms and visiting the schools. And my role in that is not to comment on what we see, but to help her think about her leadership as she builds the leadership capacity in the district. So we'll do that. I'll attend leadership team meetings. I'll attend school committee meetings as I am tonight. Again, what all of this is focused around, how can we help Maureen be the the best superintendent she can be in terms of building relationships, focusing on teaching and learning. And because one of the things that we found, superintendents who focus on teaching and learning as early as they possibly can, and it's been tough. And I don't need to tell you that in the last couple of years, with COVID being kind of the operative word, it's been tough. But we found that superintendents who focus on that are the long-term most successful superintendents that districts can find. So we're looking forward to working together. And we think that not only is she a great contributor to our program, but we think we can help and support her as she goes through this first year and hopefully into the future. Any questions that I could answer?
How long do you typically coach for?
Thank you. Every superintendent in the state is offered a coach for the first 3 years. The individual coaching is done and the content coaching is done for the first 2 years. The model for the third year is a little bit different. We do think there's still content and there will be curriculum in the third year, but then we move to something called a regional consultancy, where superintendents are together during the, in a region, meeting with a coach who facilitates it, working on problems of practice and kind of thinking through how to be strategic and how to implement strategies of improvement, which is one of the things on your agenda tonight. So she will actually be a little bit ahead of where other superintendents, because a number of the superintendents come in and there is no strategy for improvement. And so their role is to build it. You'll see something about an entry plan. That's one of the critical deliverables that we work with, as well as reporting out to the community, to the school committee, to the administration, to the staff. What do you find in that entry? And I know she's been here for 8 years, so why does she have to do this? It's a very different lens when you look at it from the lens of a superintendent, as it would be when you look at it through the lens of an assistant superintendent. She will hear things that she would not have heard as an assistant superintendent, and that's going to be really helpful in kind of thinking about how do you move forward strategically. Thank you for that question. Any other questions? I know you have a long agenda, so I don't want to tie you up.
Thank you. We appreciate your time.
Good. Thank you very much.
Nice to meet you, John. Thank you.
I can say I'm very appreciative of John, and he's been a great resource so far. The 6 hours a month is a lot, so you can imagine the various topics we've had the last month. We've had a few hot topics across the state, but it's been really helpful. And also just working through some of the details. For example, when I presented an entry plan, he gave me feedback, so I had drafts, he gave me feedback, and then we did a lot of entry plan work at one of our sessions. So very appreciative of the program, so thank you.
Sounds a lot like the teacher mentorship programs that we have more on
Yes.
and the educator level.
Yeah, and what's great is this coaching piece too. So he didn't say it, but they're not supposed to tell you what to do. They just ask you questions.
Right.
And so it's really helpful in getting you to reflect. And then as you're talking, you kind of talk through it. And so it's definitely a higher level too of coaching, which I really do appreciate. All right, so the next thing on the agenda that I have for tonight that he mentioned were the strategic action plans. And if you just give me a second, I will put that up on the screen for us and share it online as well. So just as a reminder, and you can see the cover here of our strategic plan that we launched, it was 4 years ago now, Inspire, and we're in our 4th year of our 5-year plan. And so what we've done in the past, and you saw Joe do in previous years, about this time of the year, we'll present our action steps and strategic initiatives that we're focused on for that 1 year. And so what I'm going to do is just give you some high-level overview. I shared with you in the packet all of the details, so you do have that. I'm happy to answer questions after I go through this. One thing that's really important for us is that our district action steps drive much of our school improvement plans and goals that we have. And also you'll see a through line and alignment into a lot of the professional practice goals that some of our teachers and educators will work on throughout the year as well, for improvement in day-to-day practice. So just to remind everyone, we had 4 overarching strategic objectives. You can see them up here: to engage the community as partners in learning, to support social emotional learning so our schools are safe, healthy, and balanced learning environments, to align our professional practices with the MURSD beliefs about learning, and to redefine and reimagine school to empower learning for a modern context. 3 of those strategic objectives are areas that we focused on for this year. The first 3 on the left there that I'll speak to. So when we pulled out our strategic initiatives, 1, we want to improve our school and classroom communication with our families. I'll speak to some of our communication steps that we'll be doing. We'll be talking about budget. Also, really celebrating and focusing on, as John just mentioned, that teaching and learning, and really to share the story of our learning in our classrooms. That was really hard to do last year. With COVID, with remote settings, it was hard to have it. It's hard to show it with a mask sometimes. But our goal this year is to really focus back in on what we were doing prior to COVID, when we were really celebrating what authentic learning was taking place. We continue to want to develop partnerships that draw upon the expertise of our community. This year, for number 5, providing tiered supports and interventions. We talked a lot about that last year, but in our post-pandemic recovery, reset, refresh, we have a lot going on here. A big focus is to meet our academic and social emotional learning needs of our students. We continue to work on developing structures and practices that support student agency, and to work on our SEL CASEL competencies that we've been talking about now if I go back into our plans the last 5-6 years. And finally, to bring the portrait of a learner to life through deeper learning experiences. So those are the initiatives that we focus in on. So when we did our work in drawing from our objectives and then our initiatives, we came up with 4 kind of overarching goals, and then I'll talk about the focus areas. So the first goal, you can see, really speaks to communication, partnering with community members, and developing new methods for communicating about our budget, priorities, and along with it, celebrating our authentic learning. So what I did is put it through key actions and kind of 3 buckets underneath this goal. So with communications, we've already started some of this work. I think I mentioned before to some of you, we're conducting a website and app audit. We know that there's a lot of work to be done in improving our communications just through, there's so many untapped resources within our website with that app. And so one thing we're doing is through personas, a user profile of a student or a teacher or a parent, and getting feedback, what else can we get access to information as soon as possible. So once we do that, we're going to actually develop a communication plan to include some district expectations around media communications and start to share that plan out on our website. I have some samples I've already looked at what some districts have done in other states, and it just really is to be clear about this is how we plan to communicate. We never really tell people across the board, this is our plan. You get the newsletters on Tuesdays or on Wednesdays, but to really communicate how we want to reach all of our stakeholders. So based on the audit feedback, we are going to update our website, and we started to do a little bit of work there, had some meetings as well with Aptitude that runs that to get a sense of how we can change and adapt in that area. Another area too is I've been working with our EL coordinators around communications to make sure that they're culturally responsive and that we're really able to meet all of our families' needs and that they understand the materials going home, that we're using platforms that are accessible for all of our families. So that we're still a work in progress there, but every day we're working towards that goal. When we get to celebrating learning, you've seen a lot of it over the years through Twitter, and we have the Facebook page now, etc. But one thing we want to do is to start to highlight at our school committee meetings. I really like to set up a schedule where we have, what's really important to us with students is the more we have students at our meetings, at our events, sharing what they're learning, the better we are, because they're our users, right? They're our clients in our system here. So I'm going to set up a schedule with our principals and start to bring more. So we always hear from the high school because it's the high school. We have a lot of events going on. That's kind of natural, right? But we want to make sure that all elementary schools and middle school students as well are able to get some highlights. The community knows, one, it relates back to the budget, what this funding provides that we ask for every year. Now, jumping into the budget category, the goal would be, and we can take feedback on that. I know we haven't met yet as a budget subcommittee ourselves, so we can reframe the wording of this if we want to. But to really start to have a budget subcommittee where we're engaging with multi-board members in budget conversations from an earlier, not when there's a crisis, but throughout the whole process. One way that you can do that, and we tried this a couple years ago, but I've seen it effective in other districts as well, is really just having frequent budget updates earlier, where you can hear from, let's say, the athletic department on their goals and priorities. You can hear from student support services, and you start to really get a better handle on what those priorities are, the complexities of the budget. I think you can never hear about our needs and the budget enough. Right? There's so much to it. Something else that we finished off, I don't know if you recall, those of you who maybe were part of it years ago, we're required to have a district technology plan through the state. We revise that about every 5 years, where because of COVID, we're in about our 6th year. Am I saying that right? Yeah, in the 6th year. So we don't want to go any further without taking a look at that technology plan. And a piece of it that I think is really important related to budget is to really have a plan over the years in our refresh and to try to put it out on the table and see, what devices are up at different times. Our tech department does a great job with a few people in the department. They work magic all the time, but there's a piece of the budget that comes into play with that planning as well. I'd also like to see, looking back at some historical trends to develop budgetary models for the future as best we're able to. Some areas you can do that really well, others, not as well, but I think it's a good place to start for us to really get a sense of some of the trends that we've had. And then finally, we have advocating to state legislators, organizations like MASS, MASC on issues that relate to us. I'm going to keep going unless you want to ask questions in the moment, or we could do it at the end. It's up to you. That's the first goal. Okay. Feel free at the end. So our second goal is really that focus on our multi-tiered systems of support. And you may hear the term MTSS. When we refer to MTSS, that's what we're talking about. But really we want to ensure equitable access to meaningful, grade-appropriate learning through increasing staff understanding of inclusive practices, application of Tier 1 supports, and effective use of student data to inform instruction. This is work that we've been doing for a number of years, but what we've found is we really want to focus our efforts in Tier 1 supports. And so I'll speak to a couple things that we plan to do with that. First, through the MTSS development system, we have a self-assessment that our staff can do related to their current knowledge in MTSS. Using that audit, and I know we're kind of beginning with a lot of self-assessment audit to begin, but I think that's important in some of these areas. We will analyze that audit, excuse me, and define priorities. And then we plan to implement the typical surveys that we will do, that we've talked about in the past, the panorama surveys. We have variably strength assessment, different surveys that we'll use, MTS, but we want to enhance our Tier 1 practices of our teachers And one area too that's come up that relates to this is co-teaching. So we have comprehensive co-teaching training, phenomenal professional development. I mean, we were one of those districts that Wendy Bell tells the story when she was in her other district that her teachers would come to our district to see how well we were doing. But what's happened is, and we're still doing a great job, of course, but we've had some turnover with some staff, and we have new staff that haven't been trained in that. And so we're looking at this as maybe it's a good reset to do some broad training in that area. And a lot of that is around the tier 1 practices that are taking place. And we haven't really talked too much with our educators around UDL practices. And so that'll be kind of new terms that we'll introduce as part of this work. I don't know if you recall from previous years, but every 4 years, well, one, we're mandated to have a district curriculum accommodation plan, or DCAP for short. And that is all tier 1 types of supports that we provide in the classrooms. Every 4 years we revise it. Again, the 4th year was last year. That's when we should have revised it. So what we're going to do, once we have a baseline of more inclusive practices, we're going to have a DCAP committee that needs to get together, and we're going to add in some resources into that DCAP. One thing that we did in the past, for example, when we were talking about social emotional learning, we didn't have those resources in the DCAP. So once we learned about it, we added it to the DCAP. So that's what we're going to continue to do to refresh it and make sure that it's active and used. Then we'd like to design some summer MTSS PD sessions that we could have, that would really be a kickoff based off of what we've had for initial learning and assessments this year to kick off some more learning for the following year. Parallel to this, and really there are about 10 other steps in here that I'm not putting in the strategic plan that is what's actually taking place. But we have developed over the last couple of years a comprehensive district assessment calendar. And a piece of that is to administer our benchmark assessments, particularly K-8, particularly in ELA, in math, but we're trying to expand that out as well. But to have our beginning of year data analysis and work with our teachers on improving their data analysis and inquiry cycle, where then they can go back and make changes to curriculum or instruction or assessment as a result. This year, we're in our 2nd year of iReady data. You remember the iReady data last year. We are also using a personalized instruction program this year using grant funds. It's likely because of the cost, something that without the grant funds, we wouldn't have it as comprehensive, and maybe we could purchase some for students who need it. But it's a huge advantage for us in the 2nd year now to have that personalized instruction modules, online modules that are tailored towards the assessment data that our students are getting. Our 3rd strategic goal, also related to social emotional learning, is to reconnect with our students through a strength-based approach where students are known well, celebrated, nurtured, and have a sense of belonging. And that social emotional curriculum is integrated pre-K to 12. We've had pockets of SEL curriculum across our district. We're really looking to now have vertical alignment across the board and start to develop it where it's building. So that's part of the beginning steps for this year. So we have 2 main focus areas. First is the implementation of Thrively. Now I'm not going to go too into depth on what Thrively is tonight, but once we start to do it, we're going to come back and do a full presentation of it. But essentially, Thrively is a tool, and Dave's going to present about some PD after, so we can answer questions too. But it's a tool that's really going to allow us to do a lot of things that we want to do. One, it gets at student agency and interest and does a strengths assessment and many other tools for students to say, okay, I want to learn about, let's say it's welding, and then that's my strength in certain areas, and then it targets different videos and resources they can follow up. But we can also integrate and put in our portrait of a learner competencies right into here. And it can turn into a portfolio of their pathways from kindergarten all the way to when they graduate. The potential is just immense of what we can do within this program. And we didn't just pick it because it said Thrively, but I tell you, when I met with it matches, right, with Frank, let's check this out. And we knew about it a while ago. We used it as a free version. But what it's allowing us to do is to really integrate all of the work. But in it, they also have lessons. They have SEL lessons. And so we're going to be piloting some of those lessons, and then that's how we're going to be able to build them out throughout the next couple school year. So we're really excited, but every time I meet with the owner, the CEO who launched it, and talks about how he needed to create this program for his son and to get after his interests, you just get excited. Our leadership team at our retreat, we met and talked to him and felt like this is a good fit across the board. So this is just really our implementation pathway for Thrively for this first year. And then last year we started an equity, diversity, and inclusion team. We developed a vision and beliefs and expectations, and that team was trained last year. We had some external trainers that came in and did workshops with us, and then we had follow-up workshops with our staff at the end of last year. It was really about setting the stage about what our vision is for supporting students in our district, all students in our district. And so this year, a main focus, so what we did at the end of last year is we had a school audit and we asked teachers some questions and they identified different areas they thought that they wanted to work on. So one of the areas that rose to the top was really culturally responsive teaching practices, which really aligns closely with our Tier 1 supports, kind of those instructional practices that are taking place in the classroom. And so we purchased through, again, we're lucky with a lot of these grant fundings, with some grant funding, the book Culturally Responsive Teaching in the Brain, and we plan to use that throughout. We did a mini pilot of the book study in the summer for those who want to participate. But every month we're going to be sharing out resources with that book at our faculty meetings, through our newsletters, through conversations, and then we're going to have teachers, will have the opportunity to really try out some of the practices in the book in the classroom as well. We plan to, again, at the end of last year, we reviewed our EDI vision and beliefs at each school, but we'll continue to do that with our new teachers in the beginning of this year. And then we're going to enter into our next part of our equity audit. And a lot of people, and it's something we can look into as a district if we want to spend the money. Some districts are hiring external groups to do an equity audit of the district. It's very costly, but yet some feel that that's what they want to do. We've decided right now to begin with an internal audit, and the next step is to really look at the student data, look at subgroups. So when we look at panorama data, iReady data, and look at various subgroups, how are all of our students doing? And then when we put all that data, we may discover, hey, everything's great, right? But my guess is everything isn't probably great in all areas of our system, which is why we have strategic goals and plans. And so after we do that, that'll help to identify some next steps in our implementation of improving our district in the area of equity and access. In line with that, we also will have some PD for administrators on how to support implementation of this. And one of our expectations in our list of expectations from the equity vision was to work on people first language and eliminate usage of labels of groups. So it's kind of like saying SPED students, AP students, L students, these students. And we're not leading with your group of students and this is how you are. We're leading with your getting to know each student individually as best as we can get to know them and their background and to talk and have a people first vocabulary. So that's something that really resonated when we rolled it out at the end of last year, really resonated with staff, and think that's a good, easy starting point for some of our conversations as well. Our last strategic goal is similar to what I think you've seen in the past. Some of these were carryovers that we didn't get to during COVID. So design authentic learning experiences that integrate portrait of a learner competencies and engage students in deeper learning. So I have plenty of pictures to draw from some of these activities that we've been focusing on in our district. Sam, you're in one of my pictures here. Helping out, I think. So key actions, we have portrait of a learner and authentic learning. So with our portrait of a learner, one thing we want to do is really operationalize it. So it's something that is living and breathing and part of what we do, not just something we post on the wall and say, yep, this is our portrait of a learner, but something that everyone's able to describe, reflect upon, and work towards, not just at the high school level. We purposely don't call it a portrait of a graduate, it's a portrait of a learner, and all of us fall into this category. And so the high school piloted, I'm losing track of my years, like maybe it was 2 years ago, these I can statements at their level. And so now our goal is to have I can statements that are developmentally appropriate at each of the levels that reflect our portrait of a learner competencies. Another thing we'd like to do is design an implementation plan this year for the next year on how then, once we have those statements, students are going to be able to develop practice, reflect upon them. And we do think that Thrively is potentially a great vehicle and structure that will help support that. We are bringing back our Inspired Learning Days. And one thing that we've done, we would love to have 2, but we'll see how it goes this year. But minimally, we will have 1 this year. And that's where we're going to bring in the engagement with the community too. We've had lots of community members supporting that. But that's where we can align it to the portrait of a learner competency. So that way, if you're looking for communication skills, that's one area. For global citizenship, we want to make sure we're targeting on all of those as well. Authentic learning. So one thing that we decided we want to really talk about, and we have started talking about this years ago, but to come back to, is providing PD and having conversations about creating authentic learning experiences and assessments, and developing a shared definition. When we say authentic learning across all levels, what do we mean by that? And we have a lot of great samples of what that is, but we want to really be able to have all the educators in our district be able to communicate what that means for authentic learning. We're hoping, and we tried a couple years ago and did not get accepted, which much to my dismay, because I like to get every grant I apply for, but we'll try again. They told us to apply again. We're going to apply for the project-based learning Massachusetts School Leadership Network, and it's with PBL work. So in the past, we ran PBL 101 set PD sessions, and we've had a number of our teachers go through it. And I don't know if that's why we weren't accepted, because we already had a lot of teachers that had gone through it. But if you're able to get a school in the program, you really benefit. You run through over the cycle of a couple of years, we get almost all of your teachers trained in PBL 101, which is a phenomenal training. It really walks you through project-based learning and how to make it come to life in the classroom. And you get additional support in that school network in Massachusetts as well. We're hoping, and I know we will, Dave tends to lead these, the host and share with the community to inspire learning conversations. And our focus on them would be focus on authentic and deeper learning conversations. And then finally, to provide PD to support educators to understand authentic learning and how to design various experiences. When Dave comes up in a little bit to speak about the PD, much of our PD in the first session was related to authentic learning. So some of our next steps, we want to use these plans as a foundation for our school improvement plans. We want to create model goal menu of options for teachers to use in their own goal setting if they choose. So that's something that we tend to do from a district level. And then develop a timetable of midpoint and end of year assessment and progress. I can assure you that my intent is that this is kind of a standing agenda item that we would have our district leadership team meetings, that monthly or so, we'll continue to check in to see what our progress is, and then come back to all of you to share our progress on this through various presentations throughout the year. So that concludes that presentation. I don't know if you have any questions that are specific to the action steps. I'm happy to try to answer them for you.
I have a comment that this is all excellent. I love it, right? There's a lot here.
There is. We know.
And when we've gone through this in the past, we have it's like mission creep, right? When we've gone through some of the objectives in the past, we set a set of dates, and we usually don't make those, and it gets stretched out to the point where we lose focus on, largely because of COVID, probably. Yeah. But they kind of fall off the map, and we don't have any awareness of what they were. So what I would suggest is there is so much here, and there are some very tight dates in there. What I would suggest is having a timeline, especially when you're implementing software, a timeline for the types of processes you're going to set up and how the software is going to support them. Because it doesn't go the other way around. The software does not create the process. I know that very well, right? So if there's a timeline and a way that you've mapped out processes and then implement the software so that people are utilizing the software for those processes, then I think you're on track and we'll be able to see that from a high level point of view, rather than trying to discern it from the details. See what I'm saying? So it would be appreciated if we had a higher level view of how the project status is working.
And say I'm excited just on we do get a little overly ambitious with our dates, I won't deny that, so sometimes they do have to move. But with Thrively as one example, I'm so excited. I'm walking in classrooms and I've already seen people implementing that strengths assessment, so there's goals and homework. So some of the steps that we've established and talked to staff about and had the PD in the opening day, they were so excited that they were jumping in almost even before we were doing it. So I'm excited about that, and that's a big piece of our implementation plan, is to, Dave's been working closely with the Thrively representatives as one cycle on that timeline and rollout and suggested steps in a year. Other questions, comments?
I just got a couple. I know we've got to go through the budget stuff.
Yep.
And have the budget subcommittee, we probably should put that on the calendar in the next
Yep.
couple, 2 weeks or so. I'm just trying to understand, like, what, I mean, we've had some, last year we had a lot of challenges, I'll call it. And I'm just trying to understand, like, we don't seem to have anything, or maybe we should put something in here that's more about putting the right kind of forecast tracking, approach in. I know we've talked about this before, and having the ability over the course of the year to understand how the money's getting spent and importance to plan or not to plan. I realize there are things impacted, but we're going to need something like that. In addition, I would imagine, I guess when you say this, analyze historical trends, develop budgetary models, I would even include the revenue models as well. I realize it's somewhat tricky, but at the same point, there are other districts that already have kind of tackled this. So using some of their techniques and putting some of the pieces in place, we understand that it's not an exact science, but it's more about giving us an idea of the direction we're headed. The other ones we can talk about in the subcommittee, when we say we're going to establish a budget subcommittee with multi-board members, I think that's a good thing to do. Technically, we have a budget subcommittee that has theoretical board members from each town already. Whether they participate or not is something to be paid. But we're thinking about
That's the goal, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the other item that I see that seems to be missing is something from the operational side, in terms of how we're operating the district, the schools, the approach. We talked about this a number of times last year when we were talking about, well, how can we drive, whether it's savings or improvements or different ways to look at the budget. The common comment that we got back is we need to reassess and relook at the way that we operationalize our learning approach. I think we're doing a lot in terms of curriculum and learning as it relates to the students, but what are we doing in terms of our approach to, I'll call it, deliver that learning? So I don't know if that's something we need to put in here, or that's because we do a lot of stuff here. But I think it's something strategically we need to look at and start planning for, because we're only going to run into these budgetary issues more and more. So, as a regional district, we have these challenges and we'll continue to have.
If I could add to what you're saying, I think one of the pieces of feedback we got from interacting with the towns in the last cycle was understanding when the events of the budget cycle occur, what is expected of each party in the budget cycle, what level of expectation those numbers have. Obviously, if we meet today about our expected budget for next year, it's going to be very rudimentary. Everybody should be under that expectation. So that's something that I think plays exactly into what Phil just said. Something, if we're operationalizing it, then we have defined goals that the towns know about, we know about throughout the year before we get into the final budget cycle. And when does it start? I mean, December, January is when the proposals go out. So we're already in a place where we probably should start thinking about this.
And I tend to like to start the budget earlier and have conversations earlier with the departmental and some of the needs and get it out there so we are really familiar in the towns. People have heard it and there's lots of information out there and they get the questions earlier too. You don't have the final information, of course, so later, but I think starting earlier in general is better in my experience.
I think you'll find, at least from Mendon's side, they had a little hiccup with the budget this year. They're going through, they go through audits every year as we do, but I think they're going at this point, I think they're trying to further understand the operational nature of the budget process and where they can get that right, where they goof last year. And they're bringing in outside people to do that. I think they're going to be in the mood to work with us to come up with an operational schedule for the budget report with the school. So I think now's an ideal time to start doing that.
No, I would agree. Obviously, earlier is better. I know we always had some items in terms of the way we had worked, and I know that, we had actually gotten into what I thought was a fairly good rhythm, and last year was a bit of an anomaly as well because of the way the state worked with the budget in the previous year. I totally get all that. I just think we have to, at least through the course of this coming year, look strategically at our operational approach and understand where are those real opportunities to rethink the way we deliver education or support the education of people that are there in that operational way. So we can look at, how those changes or improvements or areas we can focus in could drive, some budgetary impact in a positive way. You've got a lot of great stuff in here, I think, around overall curriculum and learning and those pieces, which is tremendous. So,
I just want to chime in and say I appreciate the continued focus on social and emotional learning. I love the idea of Thrively and connecting that to real LCL lessons. I think it's a great support for teachers who are probably wondering how to support students. So that's going to be a very interesting transition year, I think, for a lot of folks. And the fact that there are a lot of clearly stated action steps that, for me, help to connect some of the ideology that we've heard a lot about over the last couple of years. For example, Portrait of a Learner, which sounds great, and there's been some beautiful presentations, but to have that connected so clearly with some authentic learning that's going to be happening in the classrooms, I think is really helpful in terms of having a bigger picture understanding of where a lot of this investment in time and resource and energy is going into developing this ideology and how that's going to benefit students. So I appreciate seeing that broken down, and there's a lot of work there. So thanks.
Comments, questions? Won't be the last time you hear about it, so we'll continue to talk. All right. So one thing I wanted to do was just give a highlight about some of our opening day recognitions that we had. First, on our opening day, I welcome more than 27 new hires to our district, including a wide range of positions such as teachers, nurses, paraprofessionals, custodians, administrators, and I keep going, adjustment counselors, BCBAs, admin assistants, and school psychologists. At the school committee meeting, I'd like to actually welcome a new hire. I'm going to ask you if you don't mind coming up and sitting next to me, but we have with us our new school resource officer, Kara O'Connor. Phil, it's important for you to put a face with a name. You're such an important position in our school district. And thank you. Officer O'Connor has been an Upton police officer for over a year and serves as a sergeant in the Army National Guard as a military police officer. She has a background in early childhood education and past experience teaching preschool, which is really amazing, to me at least, as a former high school person, coupled with her education and training in criminal justice and training as a school resource officer. We're really looking forward to having her working closely with our schools to enhance security, support programming, and act as a community liaison. I've had lots of experiences in the past with SROs in my previous roles, and I find it to be an essential part of our staff. And I just want to welcome you, and I don't know if you want to say hi to the committee here.
Sure, my name is Kara O'Connor. I'm looking forward to this new role as school resource officer, and I'm excited to get to know the community more and see what we can do to make the best of this school year.
We have any questions for her, but she's already been in our building. She was working with us in the past as well a bit, so we're just really eager to have her with us.
So Army National Guard,
Yes.
were you with the Guard program at school, or how did you get involved?
I was not. I joined when I was 17, actually. So my junior year going into my senior year of high school, I went to Auburn High. But I had joined right from high school and went from there.
Cool, very cool. Awesome.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Something else we did at our opening day session, we welcomed back all of our faculty and staff, but we also publicly recognized teachers and staff who had more than 25 years of experience, and this is something that has not been done before. What I'd like to do is publicly just share all the names so you're aware of the amazing staff and educators who have been serving our students in many roles for over 25 years in this district. One thing that I always tell people about Mendon-Upton is it's a place that people, when you come here, the culture and community, everyone is just so nice here that people, they stay because they really like working here. So I'm going to go kind of backwards from the bottom with 25 years. And this is as 25 years served or more by that date. So they're in there next year, just so we know, clarification. But Tricia Maloney, World Language at Nipmuc, Mark King, Custodian at Nipmuc, Nancy Boats, Grade 1 at Memorial, and Karen Presby, Special Education Teacher at MISCO. With 26 years, Kathy Gerton, Guidance Counselor at Memorial, Katie Jordan, Tech Specialist at Clough, Wanda Monroe, Preschool Teacher at Memorial, Christine Tebow, Grade 1 at Clough, and Kevin Campbell, Art Teacher at Nipmuc. On the other side here, we have more 26 years. Nancy Robbins, our Nurse Assistant Extraordinaire at Nipmuc, especially these days. Janice Gallagher, our Principal at Clough. Karen Hadley Naraki, who's the food service at Nipmuc. And Marie Brigham, Grade 4 at Memorial. With 27 years, we have Bill McGinnis, PE at MISCO. Kim Bellins, our Accountant HR in Central Office. Lauren Santacandro, the Executive Assistant to the Superintendent, and she's keeping me going every day. Brenda Webster, we have in Grade 5 with 29 years. Rich Carlson, Custodian at Nipmuc with 30 years. And I made everyone do a giant drum roll. I won't have you do it here, but Fred Oldfield is a special education teacher at MISCO with 37 years of experience.
Wow.
So just wanted to share that with you. Really amazing. What we'd like to do is in the future start to really recognize now, after we've done this at certain points, years of service at that opening day. And so here we did everyone that was over those 25 years. But I think that's really important to start out with that recognition. And then finally, I know I have a lot today. Finally, I'd like to have Dave Quinn come up. He's our Director of Tech Integration. He's going to provide a brief overview of the PD offerings that we provided to teachers and staff on August 31st PD Day. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cohen, Madam Chair. This is honorable body. It's great to be with you once again. I'm just going to share my screen with those watching at home, and then with you as well. Sam, are we good on both? Excellent. We've all been pitching in to help Dr. Cohen with the immense responsibilities that come with being the interim superintendent. And I just want to take this opportunity to say how smooth the transition has been as a member of the leadership team to keep the system going, particularly under still challenging situations. She's gone above and beyond in this transition. It's been just an absolute pleasure. And so one of the ways that I'm helping out is through the PD committee. You'll notice from the slides a lot of what we're going to talk about in this quick seminar, because I know you've got new business on your agenda as well, is connected to the action plans, particularly in regards to teaching and learning. And there were, first I just want to take a moment to thank the PD committee, many members who joined a Zoom session before the start of school to help with the planning, and also those members of our staff, Cooks here, along with Jen Field, who recommended one of our presenters, Julie Stern, who focused on learning transfers. So the PD Day had 4 major strands. And again, this is all going to be a refresher based on our strategic action plan. But first and foremost, we want to understand our students. Who are they as people? And what are the tools that we have in place to help us to dig deeper beyond what we just see with the interactions and our interpersonal interactions, but also what we're observing with the students. And so I'll talk a little bit about Panorama and Thrively in that regard. And then secondly, and constructively, how are we supporting our students? And that's where that cultural proficiency piece comes in. It's one thing to understand your students, but it's another thing to understand the cultures and backgrounds from where they come from to really make that deeper connection. And as excellent as it is to know your students well and to know the culture that they come from, but we now need transfer to learning design. So how do we engage our students? How are we making sure that the learning experiences that we have not just are memorable in the classroom, but also provide value outside of the classroom? And going back to that idea of transfer. How is what they're doing on a regular basis meaningful and relevant, so that they're not just having a positive experience, they're having a useful experience. And then the final piece is how do we engage with content and skill development through the curricular resources. We brought quite a few on this year, and we've had some really useful staff development there. So on the first theme, understanding and supporting our students, teachers had the opportunity to connect with Amy Lane, who is our personal professional development coordinator, our staff source person for Thrively. She took them through the platform, talking a little bit about the strength assessment, which all students will take by October 1st. We've got it lined up, and some schools already set the date. She's also building out, Sean, to your point, a schedule of 3 months of what that curriculum would look like once they take the strength assessment. It's going to be a holistic approach that blends in SEL, but also with strengths and interests and other competencies, because what we love about Thrively is that they look at the whole child, and it's not just buckets. Amy was talking about how we don't want to bucket, we're really good at bucketizing things in school, and what they're trying to do is break down those barriers. What we also love about Thrively is they are as excited to work with us as we are working with them. And we've been conversations about some other pilots that they're working on, so we're really excited to see that partnership go. We've got a lot of positive feedback from our staff as well. Additionally, we have Panorama training. We've done a lot of that survey work over the course of the last year to look at our students' well-being and their self-efficacy, checking on their emotional regulations. We've got this data from the winter survey, the spring survey, and now teachers are now doing a dive in just to see where we were at the end of last year. Also giving them kind of a test run for when we implement the next round of survey data this fall, so that they have a understanding of how to use the platform and really make use of the data. We also have the daily or weekly check-ins that we have available, and we can ping students with questions just to kind of do that hit-and-stick approach on topics that may be of concern in your classroom or maybe of a concern school-wide. So that was a great session for those who attended. It was mainly focused on the guidance staff, but we allowed all of our staff members who were interested to attend it. And then we also had Ed Walker, who was an ideas instructor, who facilitated a 90-minute workshop on culturally responsive teaching. This session offered teachers a deep dive into the pedagogical practices and strategies, taking what they would be gaining from Thrively and Panorama, and then looking at it through a cultural lens. So that way we understand our students' backgrounds to better design our lessons to make it more relevant and meaningful. So moving from understanding and supporting to engaging our students, we were fortunate to have Heidi Hayes-Jacobs, an internationally known curriculum development and professor at Columbia University. First time hearing her speak, so it was absolutely fantastic. It's a wonderful resource to have people available from all across the country and the globe be able to come in through Zoom and speak to us. And her focus was, she ran the keynote and then 2 digging deeper workshops. And what the keynote looked at was, now that we are coming back from the pandemic, there are 3 really kind of approaches that we could take terms of thinking about school. And then she frames them around, recovering or just, restructuring what we already had and going back to the old normal. There's the other idea of refresh. We'll think of it like kind of like a renovation. So we're taking out a couple of boards, but the structure essentially stays the same. And then we also have this opportunity to reset, to rethink what it is that we wanted to do prior to the pandemic, or what did we learn from the pandemic teaching. To think about not just what we've cut out, but what do we keep, more importantly, what do we create as a new result. And her keynote and sessions really focus on two core ideas. First, the idea of authentic learning experiences. So what are we doing in terms of our assessments that mirror opportunities for what students would be doing, not just in their, real lives outside of school now, but for, in the real world settings. And we hope to tap into all of your expertise to get a sense of what types of end products that we created. But for the sake of example, do we need to do posters anymore, or are we better off, having students communicate that same understanding through an infographic, much like you see in USA Today, or you would see on a website? So how do we tell stories through data in ways that are actually reflecting what others will be encountering as needs? And then the second piece of her workshop focused, again, on that reset of cutting, but also, I don't know if you've heard of the with Marie Kondo, thinking about things that bring you joy. So how might we do that to our learning structures and our lesson plans, and what do we need to keep, what is really essential, and what is it we can change so that we can redesign and to create a better learning experience for students. And so it was, I had the pleasure of sitting in all three of her sessions, and it was really fantastic. One of the pieces that she has a whole database of authentic assessments that have been cultivated from around the globe, and it's just a really wonderful resource for us to take the existing high-quality audits that teachers already have, and what are some small tweaks that we can make to make it more effective. Also, along the lines of engaging our students, we were able to bring in Julie Stern, who recently wrote the book Learning That Transfers, and this session focused on that elusive idea of learning transfer. So we learn something in a classroom, but oftentimes we don't always see the direct application outside of school. And how do we design learning experiences that actively are designed with the intention of students being able to see the concept they learned in their math class and then apply it to a real world context. And so she walked her teachers through the acquire, connect, transfer problem. So acquiring was the baseline concept that we want to teach the student to understand, connecting, so what other frame of reference or what other schema is available that the student can then draw from, and then actively designing ways to transfer it out to a different context so that they can see the relevance and ultimately, they easily answer the question, why are we learning this? And so our fourth strand, again, is that engaging with skill development and content. So we've got 4 curriculum resources I just want to touch upon. Our teachers were heavily involved in the selection of these curriculum resources. The process is led by Dr. Cohen over the past year. So we had professional development on the Desmos, which we'll be using as a curriculum resource for our math students in grades 6 through 8. We also have Bridges Mathematics, which was a curriculum resource for grades 3 through 5. We have Amplify Science, which we're piloting in the 5th grade. And then grades 6 through 8 will be using the Elevate Science. They got professional development using that resource. And then just to close with some educator feedback, the feedback that we got was generally positive, with some areas that we could also tweak for our next PD committee meeting. But as you can see from some of the comments here, I did like the contents of the culture responsive teaching, and helped provide a similar yet also somewhat unique perspective from Dr. Worm, who we had this spring. I do want to incorporate Thrively at some point, but I think that would be something more beneficial to this entire 8th grade team. I plan to use Thrively even more than I already had, and use some more of the lessons and functions of the software. So I'm really excited about the Thrively platform. 2 other quotes. I thought Heidi Hayes-Jacobs' sessions were outstanding. I love how she provided concrete examples of how to make assessments more authentic. I'm looking forward to exploring the example database on our website. And finally, I really liked the culture responsive teaching workshop, The presenter gave me a lot to think about when interacting with students. Really excited to see our meet back with our professional development committee team in the next couple of weeks to start planning for the future. But you'll see a clear link between what we're doing in our PD sessions, but also support our strategic. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Questions on Dave? I want to thank Dave too. Just everyone's been a big help during the transition and picking up different pieces. So I'll do some PD planning, and he'll jump in and take on Thrively, and we're all kind of chipping in right now. So I just really, really appreciate you coming up. Thank you.
So I think we'll do the school committee, subcommittee updates, and then we'll address the vendors. Everybody. Is there somebody from the negotiation subcommittee who'd like to speak to the ratification of the MOA for the Teachers Association and the ratification of the MOA for the evaluation?
Dave, I don't know, I'm wondering if they've been voted on and they've been approved by them, so you can sign them.
Yeah, okay, great.
We need to take a formal vote.
Yes, we do. So we need a motion to ratify. Do we want to take them together or separately?
Do them together.
Sure. Okay. All right, take a motion.
Make a motion to approve the Teachers Association and the Educator Evaluation MOAs.
Okay. And all in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously, and those are ratified. So I think this is where we can insert the conversation about vendors for our superintendent search. I believe we are looking at and gathered information from Mtss and Mass to conduct a superintendent search. There's some discussion about these two vendors and preferences from you. Yeah.
Sure.
So I got out information from both vendors a while ago, so I was with that.
I think what you sent Mass they were currently conducting one search, but you may have been accepting their own call.
Correct. So I think my impression from both vendors was that it starts to pick up like September, October. So they were currently conducting many searches, but they just expect that to pick up. So for Mass, they have 5 people who do searches, and essentially each person typically conducts 1 to 2 searches over the course of the year. So basically, you get assigned 1 person, but there's other people available that staff them up, like everyone's conflict, etc. So it was about 3 months from start to completion for the search. We did that and a pretty comprehensive proposal. And it's similar. I think they said the first time was about 4 months. It was a bit more expensive than that. And they, they obviously got a proposal, like their 21 day proposal, laid out all of the steps and everything. All of our cost of schedule, et cetera, everything that's done as part of the process, as well as the resumes involved. You get a discount as a affiliate. It's already reflected the cost.
It's so much more expensive.
Correct.
When we say it's more expensive, you're talking about one is 13,000 and one is 10,000.
Right.
So, talking about.
Right.
What is your feeling? Vicky?
I mean, it's hard to, like, I feel like we're, not really comparing apples to apples because I don't have like an equivalent proposal from MASC. Like, I mean, I think, in general, they provide a similar service, but certainly like, it's a little more thorough in preferences and laying out everything that's included.
I would agree. Plus, I think when I talk to people that have been through the different processes, it seems like NASDAQ runs I would say, yeah, I think they both run a good process. It seems like the NASDAQ process is more thorough and transparent process. I think that the way we've gone through it, from a community perspective, possible.
Good feedback.
Well, I think especially since we're coming from a place of having, a highly qualified person as our intern at the moment, I'd like to make sure that as we go through this process, we have somebody who's helping to, as you say, to make everything transparent so that it's clear to the community that, we're fully vetting what's available.
Totally agree. It is important.
So it sounds like NASDAQ is the way you want to go.
Sounds good.
Something you need a formal vote for.
I can make a motion that we select NASDAQ as the group that will facilitate our superintendent search for us, and we get them on board, the process kicked off, we get the process ASAP.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Great. Smooth and efficient would be something that would be nice for us for a change, right? Okay, so then moving on to new business.
I'm sorry, who's gonna take on the action? Of
He is the one with the contact information.
I mean, technically you all have it.
Part of it is they'll come in, they'll lay out the structure, we'll inform pieces, all that.
I don't know if you noticed, especially we all jumped back.
No, if you want any help, I haven't been involved that much for this program.
All right, I will let them know and then find out where we go from there.
All right, very good.
Thank you. Okay, new business. We have some field trip approvals that we need to work through. It looks like starting with music department. I'm sorry.
Sorry, I got kids, they're good sectionalists. Hi, good evening. Thank you for taking the time to hear me out and ask questions about the proposal that I have. So we're looking to reproduce a trip that we did back in 2018 that was quite a success for our music students. Obviously, with everything going on, we weren't able to travel at the beginning of the pandemic when everything first started. We had to cancel that trip. And last year, we were not able to travel also. So we're looking to hopefully travel again this year in around April. And hopefully you had a chance to review the paperwork that I sent you. So we have a couple of questions regarding dates that I just need clarification from you folks on if you decide to go through this. And then if you have questions for me regarding any of the proposals that I made. But the bottom line is the music department is looking to travel as long as everything allows us to.
I'm familiar with the last trip, so I think I understand, but is there anything different that you?
So the only difference, normally I hammer down the dates. If you look in the paperwork, we're kind of toying with trying to figure out whether to go over Easter weekend or whether we do it before then and avoid Easter weekend pricing, which is a 3-week window, which is fun. So basically, it's going to be the exact same trip. The students will go down. We leave on the Thursday after half-day school, and then we're back on a Monday night. Traditionally, it would be in the middle of vacation or the beginning of vacation. I am proposing a different set of dates, which would bring us back during the school week, unfortunately. But again, that's to avoid the Easter dates. As far as the programming is concerned, the only difference between the 2018 trip and this trip is going to be that we're probably not going to do the festival portion where we compete against other groups, just because of coming out of the pandemic. The choruses did not sing at all, pretty much, for 7/8 of the year last year. And so to ask them to turn around and then go and perform, we felt might be a little unfair. But we will participate in one of the things that the students loved, which was the workshops. So basically they work with a cast member, professional musician for about 3 hours, and they learn music and sight read and then do recordings. And Disney does a really nice job. And all the feedback we got from the students who went in previous trips says that was the highlight. So we want to make sure that we're giving them an opportunity to know how much we appreciate them sticking with the program through last year, and also provide them a music experience that all the other students have been talking about, since they went. So for you folks, it would just be a case of, do we need to hammer down the dates, or do I take the information and go back to the parents and say, what's best for you and your families? What's best? What's going to get the most number of students there?
I think that's the reasonable approach.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Well, and I think especially since we're still dealing with the aftermath of the current pandemic, having some flexibility around that would be really helpful.
And we are, working with the administration in the building. We are putting together COVID questions and COVID protocols, and we will make sure that all of that is run by Board of Health and whoever we need to. I have a colleague who runs trips around the world, so I'm going to touch base with him to make sure that we're aligned with standards in the touring industry, if you will. So that our students are going to have the safest trip possible and hopefully a lot of fun at the same time.
Great. So you need approval now, or do you want to work with the dates and then come back for approval?
If I could ask for approval now, that would be fantastic. That way I can just move things along. The only question mark I have in my numbers right now is airline tickets. I'm supposed to get those this week, and those are going to be ballparks. Just because of the timing and how far out we are, but I have secured pricing on everything else so far. But if I get approval now, I'll go and get the information to the parents, and have that wrapped up hopefully within a week or two.
Okay, so if the airline tickets are wildly off from where they,
then we will have to definitely adjust, whether we lose a day or but we will make accommodations. Basically, the pricing that I gave you, I am going to stick with based on your approval.
very good. So a motion to approve the music trip for 2022. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Approved.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you for all your hard work this year. Really appreciate it.
Okay, and I believe the next up is the request for approval to have prom and an out-of-state location.
Hello. I'm Emily. I'm one of the co-advisors of the class of 2023. So we're looking at the second Friday in May of 2023 for the then senior classes prom at the Graduate in Providence. It's a hotel. We actually brought the class officers down to see it on middle of May last year, or this year. They really liked it. They brought it back, talked to their class. We voted. They picked that venue. We worked with the venue to get a tentative contract, which we obviously have not signed yet, pending approval. It looks like the pricing for students will be between $60 and $100, which is on the cheaper end based on where the kids wanted to go. That being like the aquarium, Gillette, those very, very pricey venues. And just some conditions of the prom, the students will not be able to get a room in the hotel that night, no matter what, even under a parent's name. And they have experience with that. And let's see, oh, the price of the tickets will cover the DJ, the photo booth, all of the food, a bus, to bring them to and from. And that's all I have.
Any questions, maybe?
I was surprised that you said the price, like, if there was less than some of the other alternatives they were looking at, how does it compare with like traditional, like, venue?
The traditional, it's about the same. Our students were very, they shot for the stars. They're like, oh, it's ending. We're gonna go wild. And I'm like, do we want $150 prom tickets? And I'm like, yeah. And no. And I'm like, do you want to have to drive to Boston and back? And I'm like, yeah. And we're like, no. But then they got here and they're like, it's gonna be 1920s themed. We're gonna have so much fun. And we're like, okay, see. So we talked them down a little bit, but it wasn't a compromise. They're very happy. Yeah. So that is why we have chosen this venue after an extensive search with 15-year-olds who are very picky. So please say yes, because I don't know. As much as I love driving around the state to go look at places, they really like it. So, and I do too.
So is the same plan still in effect where they'll come back here afterwards?
Yes, I believe they still have the opportunity to get a limo, that kind of, on their own fruition. But that being said, they will be signing like an agreement. The hotel is very, very confident in their ability to not even let parents sneakily get a room for their kids. I don't know how they do that, but they're like, oh, we can spot like a parent making a room for I was like, I'm like, okay, that seems a little like discriminatory to tell an adult they can't make a room. Like, that's awesome. Whatever we can do. And they have it like set up so there's 2 rooms. We can separate the kids for meals if need be for COVID restrictions. If that's still the case in 2023, that's a whole other problem. But it's a really nice venue. It's up on like a very tall floor of the hotel, so the kids can look out to the sunset and all the things. I think this price included, again, that range is if the kids want 3 choices of meals or 2 desserts. We're going to see how our class is very effective with their fundraising, so we'll see how enthusiastic they get over the next 2 years to determine if they can afford their 2 desserts that they want so much. It'll be fun. Any other questions?
So motion to approve the new venue for the senior prom?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We'll share pictures after.
Especially if it's 20s.
They plan to do the color scheme. I think we're doing silver and white.
Wow.
You guys are so far ahead of this enthusiastic group.
Fantastic. Okay, and next on the agenda is to renew some lease agreements. Currently leasing land and buildings for Memorial Elementary School and Bluff from the towns of Upton and Mendon. And our leases ran from 2001, ended in 2021, so we need to renew those. We must still have our schools.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion for renewing the leases for both Memorial and Bluff. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And we still have school. All right. Let's see. Any other matters not anticipated by the committee within 48 hours of posted meeting? Seeing and hearing none. Correspondence. Do you have any correspondence that we need to discuss? So we'll move on to future agenda items, which would include the end of the year closeout and discussing approaches to increase transparency in communications and decisions. And with that, I will take a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. And the meeting is officially adjourned at 8:24 p.m. Thank you, everybody, for your attendance.